What's up, DS3TV? We are back for another video. This one is Miscellaneous Myths, the Zodiac, and this was recommended to me by a subscriber, and it's by, you know who, OSP, Only Sarcastic Productions, and today we have Red talking about the Zodiac, so this is going to be a pretty fun video, and also, thank you guys. I think I have not said that yet, but thank you guys for it. Like, we're way over 700, but thank you. I think we're like 775. I think that's what we're at. But yeah, thank you for all the subscribers. And so keep subscribing to the channel. I want to get 1,000 subscribers by my birthday, September 13th. And yeah, so let's get into it. And oh yeah, also yeah, you can recommend me videos down in the comment section down below, so that way you can you know, like I can, you know, react to the videos that you want me to react to. And yeah, so let's get into it and play.
You know, I could never really get into astrology.
Also, I just thought about that. Don't know why I didn't think about it before, but what is your astrology signs? Mine's is Virgo, September 13th. And then I think my rising is Pisces and my moon is Scorpio. So yeah, that's it. So yeah. Tell me what your signs are in the comment section down below, and yeah, let's get into it and play.
Which is weird because I have literally never been able to stop obsessing about the stars. True story, when I was in like 3rd grade, my school took us out to this camp in the middle of nowhere. Just like 30 or 40 city kids gormlessly stumbling into the Midwestern wilderness, tripping over ropes courses and capsizing canoes. There was this nighttime activity that I don't remember the details of at all because when my group headed out into the night, I made the mistake of looking up. As a city kid, I'd only ever seen like a dozen stars at a time, and the most I could generally do was like spot the Big Dipper or Orion's Belt or the Summer Triangle, the most boring asterism in the world. Well, that is not how the sky looks outside of me.
That's definitely true. When I went out, like when I went to visit some family I have down down in Kentucky, I had never seen like so many stars out in the night. Like I just never seen that many stars out in the night sky, and that was amazing. Like I don't think I've ever been like in a place where you can see that many stars in one place, and that just always amazed me. That's actually why I kind of want to save up for a telescope. Maybe I might hold on, maybe get like an Amazon wish list thing going on, but who knows. But yeah, yeah, that always like gets interesting me, like the stars in space and stuff like that. That always is interesting to me.
The city. I was so mesmerized that, again, true story, my group accidentally left me behind and another group picked me up and I didn't notice anything was different for hours. So, yeah, me and the stars, we go way back. Thanks for nearly getting me eaten by coyotes. But I never really got astrology because astrology doesn't really care about the stars that much. It's like, we've got this sparkling tapestry of infinite mystery and I'm supposed to get invested in a fortune cookie.
That's literally what it is. Honestly, it doesn't, that's why astrology doesn't really interest me as much as like the actual stars, but yeah.
No thanks. Wow, that's such a Gemini thing to say. I will cut you. But astrology aside, the Zodiac is actually very interesting. So today let's talk about stars, constellations, and why we've been obsessed with them since pretty much day one. Now, astronomically speaking, the Zodiac is the area of the sky that the sun, moon, and planets apparently move through from the perspective of the Earth. It's centered on the ecliptic, the path the sun traces, and extends about 8 degrees on either side. And in rough alignment with that astronomical zodiac are the constellations of the Zodiac, 12 large constellations, each assigned a 30-degree segment of the full 360 degrees of the zodiac that the sun moves through over the course of the year. The zodiac starts with Aries and then continues through the rest of the zodiac constellations: Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. Your zodiac sign is determined by where the sun was on your birthday. Or Kinda. These constellations don't actually perfectly align with the neat 30-degree partitions of the year. For instance, Aries and Libra are tiny compared to most of the other signs, so the sun spends way less time in them. There's also a 13th constellation on the zodiac, Ophiuchus, that's actually massive but gets no credit because Scorpius and Sagittarius have that part of the year covered already. And Leo's actually mostly above the ecliptic, with Regulus being the only star the sun gets close to. It never actually passes through it. Plus, thanks to a little wobbling of the Earth's rotational axis, the equinoxes actually shift back very slightly every year.
Okay, wait. I'm gonna try to read the last one.
Through it. Plus, thanks to a little wobbling of the Earth's rotational axis, the equinox...
In the 2000s BCE, the Babylonians recorded that the spring equinox saw the sun intersect with the Pleiades. Okay.
Equinoxes actually shift back very slightly every...
Between 2000 BCE and 100 BCE, the spring equinox saw the sun in Aries, which is why it leads the zodiac list compiled by the Greeks in this general era. Okay.
Year, which is called axial precession or the precession of the equinoxes. After a few hundred years, it's pretty noticeable.
Since 100 BCE, the sun has been in Pisces on the vernal equinox, where it will stay until around 27 CE. Okay. 2700 CE. Okay, so that's interesting.
That all your star charts are off. So this zodiac stuff is not an exact science. In fact, it's not a science. That's why we're talking.
It's pseudoscience. But
about it on the channel. But now that that's out of the way, let's dive into how these constellations got set and how their stories changed over time. Our story begins, as so many do, in Babylon. Somewhere between 1300 and 1000 BCE, Babylonian astronomers cataloged a very comprehensive list of stars and constellations. This list is generally referred to as Mul-Apin, probably not actually said that way, named after the Plough star, which is the first on the list. In it, they set down the first official zodiac we have on record, containing 17 or 18 constellations. Instead of evenly subdividing it into 12 parts for calendar purposes, this list categorized all the constellations found on the ecliptic as part of the zodiac. They start with what is now known as the Pleiades, a bright cluster of 7 stars which they called the star cluster or the bristle. The bristle is very literal, there's no apparent associated myths just yet, and thanks to axial precession, at the time the sun passed through this point in the sky on the vernal equinox, which is why it's first on the list. But the Pleiades star cluster is located in the modern constellation of Taurus, and they definitely had myths about that. This constellation was the Bull of Heaven, the mythical monster released by Ishtar to battle Gilgamesh in retribution for his refusal to sleep with her. This is a fun case where the constellation, which actually does noticeably resemble a horned head, might have inspired the concept of the Bull of Heaven in the first place. In fact, it's possible that the identification of this constellation with a bull is really old, as there's a theory that some of the Paleolithic bull paintings in the caves of Lascaux are a star map representing Taurus, which would set the identification of Taurus with bulls as far back as 15,000 BCE.
17,000 years old. According to the latest consensus and with the awareness that dating Paleolithic art is very difficult, and the caves themselves have deteriorated from environment threats, and lots of analysis is colored by our modern masses, making it impossible to determine the actual methodology and what does that say? Motive behind this ancient cave art due to an incomplete understanding of the context in which it was created.
This is an area where it's very hard to concretely prove or disprove it, but it's very cool. Anyway, the next on their list is the Loyal Shepherd of Heaven, the precursor to the constellation of Orion. This is another one where it's not 100% clear what the associated myth is, because Mul-Apin is a star catalog, not a theogony, and the Loyal Shepherd is a bit vague. But you might note, Orion isn't actually on the zodiac. It's parazodiacal, meaning it's near to the zodiac, and parazodiacal constellations actually do see some zodiac action when planets pass through them, which is why they're included on the list. That theme continues for the next couple figures, the Old Man, aka Perseus, and the Scimitar, aka Auriga. More parazodiacal constellations, and again, not much of a story behind them. But finally, we hit another familiar zodiac figure in the Great Twins, aka, unsurprisingly, Gemini. The Babylonian great twins represented two minor gods, Lugal-Ira and Mislamta-Ea, twin guardians of doorways and possibly guardians to the underworld, who would chop the dead into pieces as they passed through the gates. Lugal-Ira is always on the left, Mislamta-Ea is always on the right, and sometimes little effigies of them would be buried under doorways as gateway guardians. Finally, a good myth in this myth video. Next up is a familiar crustacean. The crayfish, now more generally considered to be the crab, aka Cancer, has been represented by a lot of different shellfish and other exoskeleton creatures over the centuries. In Egypt, it seems to have been a scarab beetle. Babylonian boundary stones sometimes make it look like a snapping turtle. It's even a scorpion sometimes, which is just confusing. But once again, no real story here. Next we have the lion, very unsurprisingly the precursor to Leo. One of the earliest recognized constellations, it's possible the Mesopotamians saw it as a lion as early as 4000 BCE, which might account for its unclear mythology if it's kind of been lost to the fog of history. It's possible it's represented in the mythology by the vague monster Humbaba, which is another creature killed by Gilgamesh. That's a busy boy. Next up is the seed furrow, soon to be Virgo, which to the Babylonians represented the goddess Shala, deity of grain, fertility, and compassion, and was usually represented as a woman holding an armful of plants, or sometimes a massive double-headed mace. I'm guessing you get the plants if you farm sustainably, and the mace if you don't remember to plant your nitrogen-fixing legumes. Then we get the scales, aka Libra, a small and unassuming constellation without a clear shape that represents a lot of different things depending on who you ask.
The shape to me, it shows equality, like like an equilibrium, kind of just showing like is like equally weighted, I guess.
Egyptians saw a boat, sometimes it's combined with the constellation Scorpio to form its claws, but to the Babylonians, scales were very important, since they served as the sacred symbol of Shamash, patron god of truth and justice, and twin brother to Ishtar. The next constellation, the Scorpion, aka Scorpio, is pretty self-explanatory and doesn't seem to get much press from the Babylonians. It's very identifiable from the hooked tail, but it's another one with no apparent mythology at this point. Basically, if the constellation is an animal, it probably doesn't have a myth, and if it's a god, it probably does. But Scorpio's lack of complexity is more than made up for by its successor, the future Sagittarius, known to the Babylonians as the Overseer or Pabalsag, and visually represented on boundary stones with the familiar centaur archer shape. Only it doesn't stop there. This dude also gets wings, a scorpion's tail, and a second head resembling a panther. Bit of a mess, honestly. Now, the Overseer title isn't very clear, but Pabalsag is a god. We don't know much about him because he's the consort of Ninsun, the mother of Gilgamesh, and thus a much bigger deal than Pabalsag. He might have been a healer god, or possibly a hunter god. He might have kind of been syncretized with the underworld god Nergal. It's all a bit confusing. He seems to have been combined with a lot of gods over time, and his physical representation is also a little bit uncertain. Anyway, leaving the uncertain visuals behind, next up is the goatfish, aka Capricorn. A goatfish. Half goat, half fish, all goatfish. These little dudes
I
were
never would have thought I would have seen a goatfish today, but I've seen one now. That's pretty interesting and mildly disturbing.
symbols of the Babylonian god Ea, god of water, creator of humanity, and really big deal. Speaking of whom, the next constellation, the future Aquarius, was known to the Babylonians as Ea the Great One, a dope-ass merman often portrayed holding a huge overflowing vase of water. Ea was generally benevolent, but as a water god, he was also held responsible when destructive flooding occurred, so feelings were a bit mixed about him. And I don't know if it's directly related, but the sun is in Aquarius near the end of Northern Hemisphere winter, which between the Tigris and the Euphrates usually meant snowmelt from the mountains and occasional flooding. Now, things get a little bit confusing when we hit the future Pisces, because the Babylonians subdivided it into a few different constellations. First of all, the southwestern part of it is either two constellations known as the Tail and the Great Swallow, respectively, or it is one constellation called the Tail of the Great Swallow. Sometimes cuneiform is a little more art than science. But meanwhile, the rest of Pisces was either seen as a stag or as Ishtar herself, the Queen of Heaven, future Aphrodite, and full-time absolute queen. And right next door, in the place of the future Aries, was the farm worker, aka Tammuz, consort to Ishtar, part-time dead guy, and full-time shepherd. We've discussed Ishtar and Tammuz in more detail back in the Aphrodite video, but suffice to say, she's a really big deal, he's a really big deal, together they can be an even bigger deal. Coming this summer, one man's journey to the underworld.
Yes, we love the preview, the trailer of both of them.
Because he's super dead. Now, while this star catalog recognized way more than 12 zodiacal constellations, the Babylonians did assign a zodiacal constellation to each of their pre-established 12 lunar months. This Babylonian calendar was then brought to ancient Greece by astronomer Eudoxus of Cnidus in the early 300s BCE, although the Babylonian zodiac was apparently introduced way earlier, courtesy of our friendly neighborhood Phoenician traders rolling up around the 700s BCE. The ancient Greeks obviously had constellations of their own before this. There are very few cultures that don't have any constellations. Homer references Orion Orion, the Pleiades, Ursa Major, and a few others, and Scorpio is connected to the Orion myth pretty solidly. Not to mention there's a whole cluster of Perseus-related constellations that seem to have no mythical Babylonian parallels and are thus probably original Greek, although fun fact, it's really hard to research when these constellations were first established. But the Babylonian constellations seem to have been added after those Greek constellations were established, including all the central figures of the Zodiac. And this is interesting because I've actually never seen anyone explicitly point this out, but a lot of Greek-adapted Babylonian constellation myths are very specifically compiled in the labors of Heracles. Now, while Heracles himself is a very ancient figure referenced by Homer in the Odyssey, and he certainly predates the Phoenician influences by a wide margin, to the point where some people think he might actually be Neolithic, the story of his iconic labors is actually much more recent. It was supposedly codified as late as 600 BCE in a lost epic poem written by Pisander with no known prior sources. So while Heracles himself predates the introduction of the Babylonian constellations by a wide margin, the myth of his labors seems to have been written shortly after their cultural introduction through Phoenicia. And if the labors were specifically being used to justify all these new constellations introduced from Babylon, that'd explain why a solid half of them explicitly draw parallels to those new constellations. It'd also help explain why there's very specifically 12 labors. It's kind of an important number in the context of a yearly cycle. Anyway, we've already talked about this at length in another video, but here's the quick rundown. Heracles starts with a Nemean lion, which is directly linked to the constellation Leo. Then the Lernaean Hydra, which goes to, you guessed it, Hydra, which isn't on the Zodiac, but has a corresponding Babylonian constellation, the Serpent. In fact, while fighting the Hydra, Hera summons a crab to distract Heracles, which he kills, and it becomes the constellation Cancer, which is another Babylonian Zodiac myth accounted for. Sagittarius isn't certain, but could easily be accounted for by Pholus, Heracles' centaur friend who accidentally dies to a poison arrow. The Ceryneian Hind could easily be the Stag, the constellation that's sometimes also Ishtar.
I'm happy I watched these videos in order, so that way I actually do know that, like, you know, I know exactly what they're talking about.
aka Pisces, while cleaning the Augean stables could have been a job for the water-bearer Aquarius, since flooding a river is very much in line with Ea's job description. The Stymphalian birds are theorized to be a direct representation of Aquila, Cygnus, and Lyra, a trio of bird-like constellations that cluster in the northern sky, and sure enough, Aquila has a direct Babylonian equivalent. Capturing the Cretan bull is just Taurus again. And a contemporary mythographer, Acusilus, specifically drew that connection in the 500s BCE, just a few decades after the labors were first supposedly codified. It really does line up way too well. Now, some of the labors don't have super obvious parallels. The Erymanthian boar, the mares of Diomedes, and the girdle of Hippolyta don't really have constellation parallels. And the final three labors, where Heracles steals the cattle of Geryon, retrieves the apples of the Hesperides, and abducts Kerberos, are similarly not very starry. Although, fun fact, those last three are still kind of astronomical. Geryon lives on the island Erythia, which is also supposedly the home to the Hesperides, the island of the sunset. In fact, Heracles can only get there with Helios' help, lending him his sun chariot to make the journey. So Heracles is carried by the sun to the island where the sun sets, and then he goes underground to the underworld where he retrieves Kerberos. It's not too much of a stretch to read into that. I am just speculating here, but it would make sense. And it's also very possible that a shorter version of the labors myth pre-existed the introduction of the Babylonian Zodiac, a version that already included these themes of following the path of the sun, but was then modified to include these new star myths. This could also account for the miscellaneous labors that don't have constellation parallels. Also, this isn't Heracles' only star myth. He's also credited as an infant with creating the arc of the Milky Way during the infamous boob incident. And this is actually the original source for the word galaxy, derived from Galaxius Kuklos, literally meaning Milky Vault. Gross. But informative, but gross. And again, this is...
It is gross. Very interesting. But, yeah, I can understand how that's gross. Definitely.
really hard to look up. I tried finding out when exactly the word galaxy or Galaxius Kuklos was first used, and I couldn't find it, but it seems to predate this stuff by a pretty wide margin. Anyway, Heracles may have the most constellation credits to his name, but he's not the only source credited with the Greek Zodiac. All of them also have a corresponding unique myth added later, even some of the ones Heracles already accounted for. And these are the most well-known versions you're probably already at least a little familiar with, so I'll try and keep this part concise. Aries is often equated with the Golden Ram, the source of the Golden Fleece sought by Jason and the Argonauts, which is a very old myth that predates the introduction of the Babylonian Zodiac, since it was well known by Homer's time in the 700s BCE, which means it was later applied to make this constellation make sense. Taurus is often correlated with Zeus in one way or another, either when he turned into a bull to abduct Europa, or when he turned Io into a cow to abduct her. There's just so much bull symbolism with Zeus. Gemini still represents twins, but replaces Lugal Ira and Mislamta Ea with Castor and Pollux, twin sons of Leda and the Swan fame, and brothers of Helen of Troy. Though despite being twins, they do have different fathers, which seems to be kind of a thing in Greek mythology. Castor's father was the immortal Tyndareus, while Pollux' father was Zeus, and for his demigod perk, Pollux was straight up immortal. When Castor is mortally wounded during a cattle raid gone wrong, Zeus allows Pollux to give half his immortality to Castor, letting them spend half the year in the underworld and the other half in the heavens as the brightest stars in the constellation Gemini. This myth has some interesting holdovers from the Babylonian version, like the liminal role the twins play with the underworld, or the fact that images of Castor and Pollux guarded the doorways to a house in Pompeii like Lugal Era and Mislamta Ea guarded the ones in Babylon. Virgo, meanwhile, was a bit tricky and kind of a catch-all figure, and the Greeks never really settled on which goddess they wanted her to represent. She was most commonly correlated with Demeter or Persephone because of the grain association, but sometimes she was combined with the nearby constellation of Libra and turned into Lady Justice, the Roman personification of the law. Libra, meanwhile, was codified as its own constellation in honor of Julius Caesar to signify the importance of the aforementioned justice. Before that, Libra had actually lost its divine symbol status and had been subsumed into Scorpio, filling the role of the Scorpion's claws. Scorpio, of course, was connected with Orion since the Scorpion famously killed him and was placed in the sky to continue their eternal chase. And this one might actually predate the Babylonian thing. Sagittarius, while usually a centaur, wasn't always consistent in which centaur it represented. Sometimes he's Chiron, the eternal mentor, but sometimes Chiron is accounted for by the completely different constellation Centaurus. Aristophanes suggested that Sagittarius wasn't a centaur at all, but was actually Crotus, son of Pan and inventor of archery, immortalized in the stars on horseback. Capricorn is another one with a weird non-story. Ancient Greece didn't have the same goatfish symbolism of Ea, so the general explanation either links it with the goat that took care of baby Zeus, or says that it's Pan and that he gave himself a fishtail to run away from Typhon easier. I mean, it's fine, but Pan, if you want to be a mermaid, you don't gotta justify it.
You could just say that. I feel like you could just say that.
You can just rock them sparkly scales. Quick side note, when I was looking up the symbolism of Capricorn, I found a whole bunch of websites that were claiming that there was a goatfish created by the Greek god of time, Kronos, not Kronos, and this goatfish was immortal and had time powers and created all other goats as his offspring. They were like goatfish, but then they went on land and they lost their intelligence and got stupid, and like he kept trying to use his time powers to roll back time to stop them from going on land and getting...
This sounds very stupid, like something that should not be. Like something that somebody should not have written a whole entire article about.
Stupid, but it didn't work, and eventually he gave up. And I was like, that's a really weird myth, and it doesn't really sound like a proper myth. It's got like modern story elements, and I don't think Greek mythology ever features time travel. So I tried finding a source, and all of these like astrology websites were just linking other astrology websites as their source with no actual like credible like primary sources in there anywhere, and it drove me nuts.
You went down the rabbit hole, and it went too far.
So the long story short is I think it's completely fake, and there's probably some like person who like wrote that thing up in the 70s for their, I don't know, astrology column and was like, yeah, nobody cares about Greek mythologies being accurate these days. We're all rewriting stuff anyway. It's fine. So I'm like 85% sure that there is no time-traveling goatfish in Greek mythology. If you have a primary source for me, I would love to hear it. Please tell me, because this really drove me nuts for like a whole day. I was like, where's the stupid goatfish? Where's the time-traveling goat man? Internet.
Please tell me in the comment section if she ever found out. If Red ever found out. If this one was real. And also, yeah, I'm about to say tell me or link me the primary source if you find it. I mean, it sounds pretty funny, but I don't know. It does sound like something that's like 85%. Like I'm 85% sure that it probably didn't happen, but still, that I wonder.
And there was no goat man. There was never any goat man. Anyway, on a similar note, Aquarius got a pretty serious downgrade when it lost the association with Ea. Instead of mighty god carrying an overflowing water jug, it got shortened to water jug. Aquarius is sometimes just the jug, but sometimes it's associated with Ganymede, who's a beautiful Trojan prince Zeus kidnapped to serve as his cupbearer. And for the record, if cupbearer is a euphemism, it's a really nasty one. Anyway, last up is Pisces, one of the more confusing constellations in all its forms. Supposedly, to the Greeks, it represents two fish tied together with a rope. Like, I know a lot of these constellations are like 4 or 5 stars and we're supposed to see something super detailed in them, but seriously, this is an oddly specific visual. Anyway, anyone who watched the Aphrodite video will be unsurprised to learn that this Ishtar constellation became almost immediately associated with Aphrodite, who, according to Hyginus, turned into a fish along with Eros to escape from Typhon's rampage.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense.
Other myths suggest that Aphrodite actually hatched from an egg that was gently nudged ashore by two helpful fish, who were then immortalized in the stars as thanks for their help. Seriously, two fish and a rope? There has to be something more interesting we can do with this. The Mayan zodiac made Pisces a skeleton. Why can't you be more like the Mayans? Now, while these myths are fun, and definitely more detailed than the Mulap and Star Codex, it's interesting to note how inconsistent some of them are. Sure, we link Taurus with Zeus, but we can't even decide what specific cow it represents? And why can't we decide who Sagittarius is? It's because rather than deriving stories from these observed constellations like the Babylonians were, the Greeks were trying to retcon existing stories to fit the constellations they were given. So Taurus got connected with every important cow they already had, rather than specifically the bull of heaven. Virgo was every plant-affiliated goddess instead of specifically Shala, and Sagittarius got assigned to anyone who looked like a mounted archer from the right angle. Aries became the golden ram, not because the myth of the golden fleece was derived from the constellation, but because Greek mythology is kinda short on goats, and it's really the only option. And the goofier constellations like Pisces and Capricorn got some really weird explanations. I mean, you try justifying the goatfish. Incorporating another culture's mythology is hard. Stories lose context and specificity. While the ancient Greek zodiac shared the same symbols as the Babylonian one, the stories they connected them with were naturally distinct, because the originals didn't fit in their new context. They didn't have Gilgamesh fighting Humbaba, so instead they had Heracles fighting the Nemean lion. No bull of heaven? No problem. Zeus loves turning people into cows, just pick one of them, etc. The stars didn't change, and the base stories didn't even change that much. Taurus was still a bull, Gemini was still a set of twins, Aquarius was still mostly about the water, but the specifics were adjusted to fit. Basically, all of this confusion is because the ancient Greeks localized the Babylonian zodiac. So the next time someone asks, why is Aquarius a dang water pitcher, you can say, same reason Pokemon told me this was a jelly donut. So anyway, with the ancient Greek zodiac firmly established, the rest is history, and that is solidly not my department, so I'll make this quick. Suffice to say that by 150 BCE, the Greeks had subdivided the zodiac into 12 equal intervals with corresponding constellations like the Babylonians, and by the 100s AD, Ptolemy was laying the groundwork for modern astrology by drawing connections between the four humors and the seasonal temperament of each zodiac sign. Throw in the High Middle Ages sparking a nostalgic interest in the archaic magics of the Roman Empire, and the Renaissance going even harder on that angle, and it's no real surprise that the zodiac made it to the modern day almost completely unchanged. Now, of course, this isn't the only zodiac. Plenty of cultures worldwide have noticed the reliable movement of the sun, moon, and planets through the fixed stars makes a very useful timekeeping tool. The Mayans had developed a zodiac of their own ages before any European contact. Polynesian wayfinding techniques relied on massive constellations and required a very sophisticated understanding of the stars, and of course, nearly everyone knows the basics of the Chinese zodiac. Although, structurally, the Chinese zodiac doesn't actually have that much in common with the Babylonian one. The 12 animals of the zodiac don't actually have constellations, and instead of being a monthly subdivision, it's actually a year classification.
Yeah, because I was about to say it's a year, like you would say like the year of the rat or the year of the goat. You would say, like, when it comes to the Chinese zodiac sign, it's kind of weird.
Based on the orbit of Jupiter, which makes a full circuit in roughly 12 years. So every year, Jupiter advances into the next section of the zodiac. But that is definitely a subject for another video, because there's a lot going on there and this is already running long. For now, I leave you with your daily horoscope. Yeah, you personally. You're welcome. You get along well with some people, but not others. You're fun, and people like you. You should probably spend time with your friends more. The brooding hooded figure sitting in the corner is probably secretly a good guy, but watch out for the brooding figures out in the open. They're up to no good. Someone will introduce a gun to you. Make sure to fire it before the end of the third act. Don't chase the shiny briefcase. It's never worth it. If you're less than 2 weeks after when the moon is in the
I tried to keep things concise and we still top 20 minutes. Serves me right, I guess.
house.
Here's another horoscope for you. This comment section will probably be at least 30% insufferable, which is pretty much right. But yeah, that was a really good video, and yeah, so yeah, I'm trying to think. I think I was actually, I would say I was like in the Chinese zodiac. I'm trying to think. I think I was born in the actual year of the dragon. Yeah, I think I was born in the year of dragon, because I was born in 2000. So yeah, year of dragon. But yeah, so talk to you guys in the next video. Also put your zodiac signs in the comment section down below, and yeah, subscribe to the channel. I want to get 1,000 subscribers by my birthday, September 13th. And yeah, talk to you guys in the next video. Recommend me videos down in the comment section down below. And yeah, peace.